Hey, and welcome back to Culturally Sound. I'm sitting here with Jim Young, the CEO of Texas Blends, and man, have we got a ride for you today, Jim? Where did it all start for you, and how did you arrive where you're at?
Well, I appreciate having me on as well, Chandler. Yeah, so Texas Blends, some people may not even know who we are as of yet, but we've been around for a while. So we started the company back in 2012. It's my younger brother and I, but even before that, we grew up in a small town. I'm actually originally from Illinois, and we moved down here to Texas. Where we've kind of grown up since, but. I was part of a fifth generation farming family. And so we had a nice little family farm out there doing corn, soybeans, and things like that. I grew up in a very, very small town. My graduating class, if I would have stayed, was 9 people.
Oh,
Yeah. And so I moved down to Houston. My parents moved down here for opportunities. And my dad actually moved down here without even having a job. So he moved down here and said, "Hey, we've got to take the chance." And so they did. Grateful they did. But we ended up down here in the Houston area, and that was in the late '80s or so that we ended up here. And I went from a class of 9 to a class of 600 people overnight, which was a pretty big culture shock,
yeah.
overnight. And so anyway, was kind of found my way and went to school out in the same area here. So Cypress is a suburb of Houston area, and went through junior high, high school, and so forth. Um, and didn't really have any kind of clue of what I was doing yet. I knew that I needed to make money and wanted to make money. We didn't come from a rich family. Farming is not, especially on the family side of things, is not where you get rich. It's a great life and a great way to be, but it's not where you're going to make a big killing there in terms of money and so forth. So anyway, so we I was in high school, went to junior college, and went here locally for a bit. I wasn't able to go straight into a 4-year school, and went from junior college, and then was able to I went from junior college to junior college, and then I ended up coming back to the University of Houston. And during that time, I'd spent a lot of time in the restaurant industry and then trying to find odd jobs and things like that. But so while I was going through this junior college phase, um, I was also working full time. And so even in high school, I think it was my junior years where I started, I was working, leaving school at around 11 o'clock in the morning, doing that half day type of deal. And I left and would go and then work until 9, 10 in the evening. And that was my junior, senior year. And that kind of just traveled on then is when I went to junior college. Um, I ended up out in the Austin area. San Marcos is kind of south of Austin, there between San Antonio and Austin. And so I was going to junior college out there as a transfer in, and I signed up with a one of those temp agencies, and I was basically took on almost 30 jobs or so, probably within a few months. I mean, every day was a new job type of scenario. I went from working on concrete trucks, trying to help out the guys working on the engines, to working at a Christmas store, just random. Anyway,
Yep.
I ended up with this guy out there that was doing septic systems and that sort of thing, and he had his own business. Older guy, he was like 70 or so. And that was kind of my first opportunity, really, at being able to not just outside the farm and the family stuff and all that, but to see somebody really trying to run a small business.
Hmm.
And so I kind of took that on, and I had exactly one accounting class under my belt at the time. And I said he was having issues with his, and this is back, in the like late '90s or so. And so he was having some trouble with his accounting, and I was like, you know what? I'll take that on. And so I went from helping him just do random things around the shop to, hey, I'll take this. And so I went home, got Peachtree accounting,
Yep.
and just started to try to figure out how to build out his accounting system for him. And so, but that was kind of my first opportunity that I was given to run something like that, and the trust that he had in me to do something. And anyway, so that took a while. That company ended up moving and relocating to another location. I had an opportunity to go with them. Instead, I came back to the University of Houston and hooked up with some friends that I had had in high school that were now going there. And they said, "Hey, Jim, you got to come over here, come back here. We'll go to school together, finish out." And they said, "Hey, we're in a fraternity." And I was like, okay, all right, I mean, fraternities have they at one point in time had kind of a mystique about them, whatever we're going to call it there.
Sure.
And so I said, sure. And so then I ended up rushing and joining this fraternity. And it was a Tau Kappa Epsilon TKE. And it was one of the best opportunities, though, that I had come across. And because at University of Houston was mainly a commuter school, and it still kind of is to some degree. It's become much more of a campus style, though there is a lot of campus life now. But back then, it was a lot of commuting and so forth. So you had people that were going to school and then working full time. It was not uncommon. Anyway, I hanging out with these guys, and one of them was able to get into a investment company, mutual funds and that sort of thing, and working at one of our big towers that we have here. It's the tallest building that we have in the Houston area, down in the Galleria, and they're working up on the 46th floor and saying, "Hey, you guys got to come in." They're hiring all kinds of people to come in and answer the phone for broker dealers and representatives and people asking about their money, basically. And so a lot of us applied. I got one of the positions. And during that opportunity, I got to learn how to speak on the phone, how to talk to people, and it was different than working in restaurants and things like that, because people are upset about their food, but it's different when they're upset about their $1 million account that, lost a bunch of money that day, and you've got to explain what happened, right? And so a little bit of working under pressure and a lot of accountability. They would record your phone calls, and then you would have to sit and talk with your manager about phone calls. So they would bring you in randomly and say, "Hey, here's the 3 calls we took from you this week, and let's go over this." And so there was a lot of feedback given, right, in terms of how to be. And so that was a really cool experience. I did that for a bit of time, and I recognized that I wanted to do something different, because it was very much like the movies Wall Street and stuff like that you would see. It was a lot of that, and that just wasn't where I wanted to be. And so it was taking me a long time to finish out of school. And so I said, okay, I've got to do something here. And so I ended up making the decision to quit jobs. And I went to school full time for my last semester. It was 21 hours of school, which most people are taking 12, And so I did that all in one semester, finished, got out, and I started applying for different jobs in the banking industry. And I was looking at insurance, banking, whatever I could find. And the idea I had behind this was that I wanted to find and be around people that had money, because I figured, hey, I need to learn how to be around and talk money in order to go make money. That was my thinking and thought process. And so I ended up getting a job with Chase Bank, and very briefly there, I was working in their branch, and again, that's not where I wanted to be, but it's where I had to start. And so I was there working in the branches and talking to different people about their startup business that they wanted to, somebody's walking in with a shoebox full of money or whatever, and hey, I need to borrow some money for this venture that I've got, and I'm just kind of wowed by it all still. And so anyway, I got a call exactly 1 year from the day that I had gotten hired from another bank, BBVA, Compass, now it's BBVA. Back then it was Compass Bank. And they said, "Hey," "you applied about a year ago here. Would you like to come in and interview for a business banking position as an analyst?" And I was like, "I have no idea what that is, but yes, I do." And so I get in and I go to this interview, and I'm sitting there waiting, and there's this guy sitting in this office, and I can kind of see where he's at. He's seeing me sit, waiting, whatever. And he walks up, he gets out of his office, and he comes over to me. He's about my age. And he says, "Hey, how you doing?" He says, he goes, hey, you know what? We're talking for a brief minute. He goes, you know what? You're a pretty cool guy. I can just kind of tell. I've been watching you, just be. And he said, I'm going to do you a real solid here. I'm going to, after you're done in the interview, I'm going to go talk to them to see kind of how it went. I'm going to call you back to let you know. And he said, I'm going to try to push for you as best I can. Never met the guy, right? And so I'm like, wow, okay, yeah, this is great. Well, I have the interview. It goes great. I figured it went pretty well. And sure enough, I get a call later on. And he's like, Jim, hey, this is James Alexander, and I'm going, hey, James. And he goes, yeah. He goes, man, it went well. I put a good word in. He's like, I think you're on. I'm like, this is great, right? It's an opportunity that I didn't expect. It was what I was going for in some ways, right? Putting yourself in a
Mm-hmm.
position to succeed.
Yeah.
But I didn't recognize at the time. So anyway, I get the position, and as soon as I get there, the guy's gone, and he leaves a note, and he left a note for me and saying, hey, Jim, I'm so sorry. He's like, I had already just put my notice in as soon as I was trying to help you get in as well. And he goes, I didn't want it to be awkward, but hey, good luck here. You're going to do great and so forth. Because he had another bigger opportunity to get to. And I'm just going, wow. Well, so I was able to keep in touch with this guy, right?
Okay.
And so and down the road here. But so I'm sitting there. Now I'm meeting my trainer, basically. And
Mm-hmm.
it's another guy who's in this credit analyst position.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm talking with him, and he's like, hey, great to meet you. And I'm about to head off now because I got hired I have to go to Birmingham, Alabama for an extensive training period for credit training and so forth that they send you through.
Mm-hmm.
And so I'm like, great, hey, I'll see you soon. I've got to go head off to credit training, and when I get back, we'll hang out. Well, I go off to credit training, and I get back, and he had put in his notice. And so I get back, and I literally had nobody to train or to give me training then on what I had
Right.
to start taking over. Well, I was taking over the credit for all of the lenders in the entire business banking group for them, and had
Okay.
no clue of what I was doing. And so it was a baptism by fire type situation. And I just kind of took it and ran with it, and was put under the gun pretty heavily to start with. So
Mm-hmm.
um, it was a really fast, hard introduction into that world of business banking. Got a lot of cool experiences, and then I migrated from there and went from a couple different banks. And in part of it, I actually followed that first guy that gave me that call back and so forth to help me out. I had followed him to another bank at one point in time, which later became Citibank.
Okay.
And so I was in banking for quite some time, and kind of moving up the way, VP, SVP, group manager, managed the whole group for the Houston area, for Comerica Bank here. While I was doing that, though, I had also made the decision to start kind of moonlighting with other business as well. So as I started out, it was around 2003, and this was just as I was getting started then on this business banking venture.
Mm-hmm.
And I recognized right away I had to do something in addition to what I was doing, because otherwise I was just going to get a paycheck, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so my younger brother and I were kind of big into like fitness and nutrition type of thing. And I said, well, I don't know what I need to do for business, and I need some help. And so we went down the franchise route. And so we basically signed up with Smoothie King back then as a franchisee, which is they're a big franchise now.
Okay.
And so did that, started out as a franchisee, and we ran that from 2003 till about 2008 or 9 or so. And while I was in banking, I was recognizing it was not where I wanted to be on the franchise again. It had a great opportunity, but because of all the different ideas that I was starting to sprout with, we understood this wasn't the place for us, that we had to get out of this, right? We had to bounce
Mm-hmm.
out.
Mm-hmm.
So I get a call. In the business banking world, you also go out with like branch managers and that sort of thing. So you're going out on joint calls. They might find an opportunity, and they're going to call you and say, hey, Chandler, need you to come out. We got somebody that you got to come visit with, and we want to see if we can help them out, right? So I get this
Mm-hmm.
call. Hey, Jim, we got this guy. I think you're really going to want to talk to him. And so sure, I'll come out. Well, I go out and meet this guy, and he does he has an alcohol company, but it's not a traditional alcohol company. They do wine-based alcohol. I'd never heard of it before. I'm like, wine-based alcohol? Like, well, you make wine? He goes, no, 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 no. He goes, we make alcohol that is still considered wine, but it tastes like Jack Daniels, or it tastes like vodka, or it tastes like tequila. I'm like, what? And he goes, yeah. He goes, you know that smoothie stuff you're doing? He goes, you need to do this. You need to join us and do this. And I'm going, really? And I'm sitting and thinking about it, and I said, okay, well, that sprouted the idea then, right? So here's what we did then. This is where it took a little bit of cleverness on our end. I was with Smoothie King still then yet, and I wanted to make this move. Well, we're tied to them. Part of their franchise agreement, rules, restrictions, and so forth, is that if you want to bounce out of their system, they have first right of refusal. And so they can say, hey, you know what? That's great. See you later. But we take over your location. All of the fixed assets, all the money that you put into it is now ours. See you later.
Yeah.
I knew that they were having a franchise convention coming up. They have their annual convention, right? And it takes a lot of time away from everybody, including all their internal, counsel and so forth. I put our notice in 30 days before this was happening, knowing that it was tied up, that they weren't going to be able to do much with it, right? And because I didn't want to give up all the money that'd be ridiculous, right? To give up,
Yeah,
I mean,
of course.
and so we did that. Sure enough, they weren't able to do anything with it, and all of a sudden, we were able to now take this what we built on a smoothie side of things and turn it into our own franchise concept, Daiquiri King. And so we created Daiquiri King, which was kind of like the New Orleans style drive-through type setups. And so we're running that. This is now 2009, all the way up until 2012. And here's the issue we're having then, okay? So we have this place running and so forth, and we have our alcohol, we have fruit mixes that we're using. The problem is the fruit mixes, they're limited in the quantities that we can get and that sort of thing, and they're always out of stock. And then the other is everything else that we want to find is just awful quality. And so I'm thinking back to the days when I grew up and we'd go to the 8th grade dance, and there was Fuddruckers here when Fuddruckers used to be a big thing, and they had the wall of daiquiris and the wall of virgin drinks and all that, and you would go in and get a Bahama Mama, or and that was a great experience, and a lot of people here remember that experience that are my age. And so I'm sitting here going, we've got to get that kind of quality back into the market, because everything now is just up to powder, or it's just sugar. There's nothing in there. And I was like, and the stuff we're using now is a fruit mix, but there's just not enough of it, and there's not enough varieties. And so I did a lot of searching and ended up running into a gentleman. And I run into this guy. He's able to put us in touch with some people that are able to help us start this process of getting these mixes going and building out flavors and everything. Well, as soon as I meet this guy, within, I don't know, a few months, he passes away. Just randomly. I'm messaging, and all of a sudden I'm not getting any messages back. I had to do further research because we were just at the point of where he was connecting me with these people, and I hadn't gotten far enough in yet to even know where they were at and that sort of thing, right? So he was kind of playing a middleman at that point in time still.
Right.
So I do my best Sherlock Holmes and try to figure out what's what, and I'm able to find these folks, and I'm going, you're not going to believe this, but we were doing XYZ, and then he passed away, and they're like, yeah, we were so sorry. Let's go. This is great. We've been wanting to work with you. We didn't know where you guys were at, and this whole deal. So we start this process then, and we start making our mixes. And as soon as we do, we start having people asking us that are also daiquiri shops saying, hey, can we start selling your mix? Because it's the best that's out there. There's nothing like it. And we were like, well, yeah, sure. Okay. And here you go. We'll sell a couple on the side, whatever. Right. And then all of a sudden, the owner of the place that we had gotten connected with that was helping us get all this set up passes away as well. And so now there's another disconnect because the patriarch is no longer there.
Right.
And so now we're left kind of struggling because we're now trying to figure out how to work with whoever's going to come up next. Well, we got lucky. It ended up being his kids that were very young still. And so we've had to spend a lot of time then at that point trying to, get it and build a relationship with them as well, right?
Right. Right.
And so as we're building a relationship and trying to get that going, trying to also build in the same vision that the patriarch had for us, because the patriarch had big vision like I had big vision and was like, let's take this thing up, right? And so
Hmm.
that was
Hmm.
another struggle, was trying to get the rest of the family to buy into the it's a big idea that we had. I mean, we're taking on multi-billion-dollar companies, internationally. It's
Hmm.
not just a side hustle on the weekend, and so um, but anyway, so at the time we were still very young, and so we start servicing these different places, and then all of a sudden I'm sitting here going, you know what, the idea of running our own store, we're competing against the people that we're also trying to service, and that
Hmm.
doesn't make sense. And it might make sense for some people, but I was like, it didn't make sense for us because of what we wanted to do. And then my vision there was kind of growing more on Texas blends, right? We took that and I said, okay, we've got to shut the other stuff down so that we have all of our attention focused on this. And so we shut everything else down in around 2014. My younger brother was kind of taking and running this. Like I said, I'm still at the bank. I'm banking daily, and I'm doing this as like in the evenings, right, and on the weekends whenever I have time.
Okay.
Not a lot of time for family, by the way. If you hear, I mean, this is a lot. There's a
Hear
lot
you.
going on, right? So I was fortunate that we didn't really we had young kids at the time, and so my wife was able to help kind of manage a lot of that. She was working too, though, and so it was a lot. Income's 2016, and I end up having to leave the bank. They were going through transition. They had brought in the Bobs, basically, if you're familiar with
Okay.
Office Space.
Yep. Yep.
And right, so they brought in the Bobs, and so I was given an opportunity to relocate, take on something new, or do something different. And I
Hmm.
decided not to. I took the parachute instead, and so I took the parachute. And from the end of 2016 up until 2018, I was doing a lot of soul searching, trying to figure out how we're going to do whatever we're going to do, because we don't have a lot of equity sitting there. We don't have a lot of capital, and we've got a very young business with big aspirations, right?
Hmm.
The other thing that I understood is that we had a product that at the time did not look the way it looks now. It was just a fruit mix in a bottle. Well, a lot of people have that kind of a product everywhere in some ways. It doesn't matter how good it is, it still kind of looks the same, right? And it's like
Hmm.
wearing the same
Hmm.
kind of tennis shoes. It's like you got to be pretty different. You got to be Nike, you got to be something to be, And so I'm looking at our bottles, and I'm going to this fitness place that a popular business owner here locally, his name's Mattress Mac, owns here. And I'm going there every day and trying to get my head right and working on myself that way. I'm looking at our bottles and I'm like, hey, okay, we've got this bottle and it's hurricane mix, for example. And I'm like, so what is so special about our mix? It's like, well, it tastes great, whatever. We've got to do something to market it differently. My first idea, and I have so many renditions of these bottles, it's ridiculous. Um, but we started with a hurricane symbol. I said, hey, we're in Houston, hurricane symbol. I was like, that'd be funny. It's a novel at least, right?
Okay.
And I'm looking at it, and I'm going, okay, well, this is something. And I was like, but something was itching at me, and it was like, this is not it. Like, this is not the end. Like, we've got to do so
Hmm.
much more than this. And I started thinking about it, and I said, what would Walt Disney do if Walt Disney had access to our stuff? And then I said, in addition, what would Walt Disney and Coca-Cola do if they had been able to get together way back when Walt was starting out? How different it would have looked?
Hmm.
So then I said that hurricane symbol needs to turn into a character. And the reason is because people won't always buy from you or I, but they might buy from these unlimited amount of characters that we create that are kind of like in a garbage pail or kid style. Remember the
Right.
trading cards?
Hmm.
And
Hmm.
so the idea then was to create these characters, and I've got one here. This is our Storm Chaser Dan, our hurricane bottle, for example.
Okay.
And the idea was to create this whole concept around all these characters to be our spokesbots. And then so that kind of started it. So Storm Chaser Dan was our first Blender bot, and then this started this whole thing, this idea. And like I said, I was in the gym and I'm exercising, I'm playing volleyball with my girls or something in the gym, and this guy's sitting at the desk, and I'm like, hey, I got this crazy idea. I was like, and he was like, well, tell me about it, And I'm like, well, this is what it is. And he goes, you're not going to believe this. He's like, but I'm a graphic artist, and he's like, you know, you're kidding me. And it's like, so this is how it started then. We started with that first character. And so we built that out. And now we have, I don't know, 40, 50 plus characters that we've built out, right? And there's a point and purpose to each one of them. And so we built out these characters. And then I said, well, that's great, but these characters only take us so far too. I said, what's the catch to it, right?
Hmm.
So the catch that we have on these is that we're creating some of this here, and this is initial content that we're creating, but this is meant to be user generated content, UGC,
Hmm.
so that think about, again, Walt Disney, think about Netflix, think about Barstool Sports, on the screens at the restaurants and things like that. Well, what happens if you give the opportunity for the people that are consuming your product, whether it be at the restaurant or wherever, and they have access to your content and create their own based upon your content? You're basically giving kids and creators and folks that like video games and different things like that the opportunity to engage with the content, right? And then not only be able to do that, but create additional content that's voted on, and the opportunity to be able to have it shown internationally around the world. It's like being able to put together your own little Netflix special or whatever, and then throw it out there, and it might get shown,
Right.
right? And so that was the bigger picture now. So then we still had work to do yet, because it's great. You got ideas, you got bottles, you got characters. You still don't have it all. So then we started working on our relationships with the different machine manufacturing companies then. And so we spent the last 5 years now plus working on these relationships, building relationships with them, so that
Hmm.
our content, when these new machines start coming about, where they now have lighted displays on the machines and things like that. If you're familiar with Barstool Sports, and you remember how they started, it was the trivia type stuff that used to be, at bars and restaurants and that sort of thing. Well,
Hmm.
now it turns into full-on entertainment and so many different stations and channels they have. Our idea here was kind of similar for the bots then, and it was to create that same kind of an idea there. And so that's kind of where we're at now, is building out this platform then for content, so that we have the ability for, it's basically, consider it the filler content that if you're using the Texas Blends products, you get the opportunity to put that filler content on your different screens and whatever else you like. In addition to that, the kids that are coming to the restaurants and they see that bottle behind the counter or whatever, it used to be where you would have this, and they would, your parents would buy a drink, and they'd have these nice big fruity drinks, and the kids sitting there sucking down on a milk or a water or whatever,
Hmm.
right? You're not including them. And so the idea there was to try to bring it to where it's on, it's either on the placemat there with the QR code, it's on their phone to where they can play with it there, but to give that interaction.
Hmm.
And for the longest time, we were trying to figure out why nobody had thought about this sooner, in terms of trying to kind of create like cereal box content type of thing with drinks, the way this is done.
Right. Right.
We figured out what it was. And the problem and I give you exactly what it was. So it took us a while to figure this out. The alcohol guys can't touch kids.
Right.
They're too young. The
Yep.
machine folks, the kids aren't paying attention to the machines.
Hmm.
And then you've got the rest of the players that are out there, as we talked about before, they're too big. They're
Hmm.
multi-billion-dollar conglomerates. They aren't taking the risk to put that out there, and they don't have the people in place to come up with something like that. It wouldn't, and then also the other part of it is it wouldn't come off as authentic for them either, because they've already set to where they're at. And so all those things added up to, this is why we're the ones that are coming up with this solution. And it's because it was kind of geared towards what we're doing.
So I like sitting here listening, I never imagined that that's where we'd end up. The serendipitous relationships that you intersect with, the tenacity that even when your connections pass, you're still chasing down the road and trying to build it out and never giving up, right? The willingness and the confidence in yourself to do accounting for a septic guy when you have a class of accounting, taking on a business credit position when you actually have no experience whatsoever in that space. What gives you the confidence in yourself to sort of touch on that? Where does that come from?
Uh, I mean, when you have no other options and choices, I mean, what some might think of as confidence, I guess, is just survival
Right.
too,
Right.
right?
Yeah. Courage
And I
inspired
mean,
by fear.
yes, I mean, I tell you, being not having a lot when you're growing up, right,
Hmm.
creates I don't know if it's a hunger for anything, because that's the other thing too. It's been interesting is, I think anybody that knows me would tell you that I'm not hungry for a lot of stuff. It's
Hmm.
not even that, and it's not even hungry for the notoriety or anything like that that would come from something like this. It's purely just for the fun and enjoyment of doing it in some ways. I
Right.
mean, I could be doing a
Right.
lot of other things and I would get the same enjoyment out of it as well, I guess is what, and it's, um, yeah. So,
It's the journey. It's finding the joy in the journey.
yeah. And then the other part of it is I am very much the one that I'm never going to retire, because what would I retire to? And I've seen so many
Sure.
people do that, and I've had a couple of stints. The other thing too, here's an interesting part too, is throughout my time I've had a couple stints where I've been like off of work and so forth for 6 months at a time or whatever.
Mhm.
Those stints, when you go through that, you recognize real quick that the enjoyment you think you're going to get out of like a retirement type scenario is not what you think it is, especially when
Mhm.
everybody else around you is still working or doing whatever. I mean, unless
Mhm.
you've got a whole bunch of friends that are also retired and you're just going to go run around crazy, there's you get bored very quickly, and so
Right.
you've really got to find something that is a passion for you. And if you can find, like they say, right, if you can find something you love and it's a passion, wow.
Sure. Yeah,
So
you never work a day in your life.
yeah.
So the the willingness to leave everything behind and move down to Houston from your father, that like that thread sort of seems to stick with you. The willingness to leave everything behind, burn the boats, and just carry on forward, have belief and faith in yourself and your solutions and your team and your abilities to figure it out. Does that resonate with you? Do you see any truth in that?
Uh, I would say that I am always been considered a problem solver,
Hmm.
and I'm always. The other part too is I have a intrinsic in here to just create and invent. And
Hmm.
even if it's something as simple as, and really what it ends up being, it's almost an. I know ADHD is like a really hot thing nowadays, but it's
Sure, sure,
uh, coming and recognizing that whatever that is, that I'm dealing with some of that, and so
sure.
literally every day I wake up with new ideas, new inspiration, new content to create, that I've got to get out type of
Hmm.
thing.
Hmm.
And if I don't, well, then the next day I wake up and it's there again, brand new idea. And so I would say that's been one of my biggest struggles, is being
Hmm.
able to find folks that are able to keep up with the different types and all the different content and different ideas that I have to get out. And
Hmm.
so that's been a big part of it too, right? And it's um, finding those
So
that can match.
that's an interesting. It's always great to come up with ideas, but how do you tie them through to execution, action, and bring them to reality? where they're not just ideas left on a whiteboard, they're actually actionable and tangible into something that can be carried forward.
A lot of ideas hit the floor. A lot of ideas hit the floor. I would say that there's one thing that I'm actually excited about with AI coming up, and that's our part here too, is that I would say all two things. 2018, while we were developing, 2019 roughly, I'm sorry, when I had our team coming in and I'm building up our team, I'm telling them right away, we need to start sharing the people that are using our products. And they're looking at me like I'm crazy. They're like, you're going to be telling all of our competitors who's using our stuff.
Yes.
And I was like, yes, we are.
Yeah.
And they're like, that's
Yeah.
just nuts. They're going to steal all of our customers. And I said,
Then we
they
need
can
to
try.
make a bigger product. Yeah.
And so
Yeah.
now what is everybody doing now?
Hmm.
Right.
Yeah.
And so, from that, I guess I kind of seem like an oracle a little bit, right? Because it's like, what are you doing? And now it's commonplace. You're right.
Yeah.
Um, And so that's one. And then the other is AI. So, and I think I was one of the earlier adopters too, in terms of this is coming. And every time I'm talking to everybody, it's, you're crazy. That's not, and look where we're at. I mean, and it
Yeah.
may not come exactly in the time frame but it's already on its way. The scalability of it is insane. And so
Hmm.
we use AI a lot. And I use it in the way of trying to get people to replace the seat they're in and telling them, look, it's funny too, because a lot of folks they're either really worried about it, right, or they don't care about it. And the ones that are really
Hmm.
worried about it, it's trying to express and explain to them, it's like, I'm not looking to replace you and having you leave. I want you to do bigger, better things. And I
Hmm.
look at it as a tool in that it helps us scale up faster and compete against bigger companies because it can do the work of several people. Now, all of a sudden, I can compete against companies that are larger because
Hmm.
I have the ability to tackle on more tasks, especially the mundane stuff that people get tired of or don't want to do, and
Hmm.
or forget, like you were saying earlier about, how do you keep track and all that. Well, AI doesn't lose track like that,
Hmm. Hmm.
and so I think that's something that's going to benefit a lot of people too, is just being able to take care of a lot of the mundane tasks, and give rise to a lot of additional creativity to where all these ideas that have hit the floor, well, imagine if they hadn't,
Hmm.
right?
Hmm. So, I mean, a lot of that concern around AI is born of fear or lack of understanding. And in order to bridge that chasm between I'm fearful of AI to I'm embracing AI, using it and leveraging it, requires a lot of trust within your team to believe and that you're a man of your word and you're not just looking to replace them. How do you build that trust with your team to allow them to know that you're coming from that place of compassion and want of better for them?
By action. And so
Excellent.
the couple of things that we've done over time is where, you know, hey Jim, man, I need a few more dollars, whatever, and we're usually on top of stuff like that, but it's, hey, what do you need? Type of thing, and then what are we going to do to make sure that you're worth what we're talking about, right? So that's one. The other is during pandemic time, we went without being able to sell product, incomplete for 6 months, but almost 9 months in some pieces. And we had learned a valuable lesson at that time, in terms of supply, sourcing, strategic, so forth. The issue that we ran across, which is wild because I would have never thought this would have been a case, we ran out of bottle caps for our bottles.
Yes.
Insane. And the
Yeah.
reason why, you might already know this, but the reason why was because pellet
Hmm.
resin wasn't available. And what had happened was, is as soon as that had gone down, as soon as the word had gotten out that, hey, there's going to be some issues,
Yeah.
your primary buyers out there bought up, not, well, I said they bought up the entire market. They own the market already, but they basically just didn't release it to the secondary
Yep.
and the tertiary market. And so because we're
Yep.
part of that secondary tertiary market, it wasn't being released to us. And so
Hmm.
we were basically just held standstill. Well, I made the decision at that time, and I said, look, I said, I don't know how long this is going to go on for. And I said, but at the end of the day, I know that I need y'all here once this is all over. I'm going to try to keep everybody on. And so we gave up as a family, gave up a lot, in which
Hmm.
I would say we're still recovering from, in terms of coming back from all that, because that was a lot that we gave up in order to just keep things going at that time, and that's been
Hmm.
several years past now. Um, but that, in addition to the other pieces of kind of paying attention to what's going on, so that the things that I was talking about were literally coming true, to where it was like, it wasn't a surprise to them when certain things were happening. I was just like, hey, this is what's going to happen here. This is likely what's going to happen now because of the trends. I'm paying attention to what's happening, right? And so this
Hmm.
is logically what's probably going to happen. Sure enough, it happens, and they're just like, wow, like, how could they leave at that point then? Because the amount of safety that was provided to them in some ways during that time. So it created a lot of loyalty very early on. Like I said, we brought a lot of those folks in from like 2018 to 2019. We brought in several more now. So like I said, we have our regional sales management teams and all that now that were brought in as of last year through now. They haven't had as much of experience of that, obviously, so it's not the same. But we've got our core group, and that's what they know. So,
Hmm. Yeah, I mean, it's the culture that breeds trust. And I had a conversation recently with someone around, um, you know, culture isn't what you create; it's the result of the actions that you've undertaken. And that, while that may be an unpopular opinion, I find it really hard to argue, because you can't
yeah.
just say you want a culture. You have to do things in order to create it, and that's what breeds that trust. And I mean, there's a lot of dissension around you know treating your company as a family, right? And as your own, and stop referring to your team as your family. But you know it's not about that, I think. And I'm interested to get your perspective on this. I've always sort of looked at it as, they may not be your family, but you need to treat them as your family, so that there's that respect and trust that'll continue on and allow you to build upon them as part of your team, or a part of your foundation that's gotten you to where you are, and not have a lack of respect and awareness in the humility that of what that takes. Do you have a take on that?
I do. It's a pretty strong take too. So coming from background of, I mean, I was 8 years old and walking bean fields and
Mm,
cornfields with my grandparents. I mean, I'm literally out in the field, 160 acres, and you're walking it. Well, that farm now, a good portion of it is owned by Walmart. They took over a lot of our farm. We had to sell it off here. Like I said, I was part of those generational farmers, but during my generation, they had to sell it off, unfortunately.
hmm. Hmm.
Um, and but so the idea of family farming, all that, and then being around a lot of family businesses. My mom having a family business. My dad trying to run a business at one point when he was younger.
Hmm.
Um, I would say that it is one of our strengths if we can figure out how to bring some of this back, because the problem right now is that everybody is got the mindset of the business is just good for the owner, or they're out to get me, or there's a weird dynamic now. And I have an idea of where it's coming from. It's not internal, that's for sure. And I
Hmm.
would think that if we were to really bring back the good days of sorts, it would be to bring that back. Because in the reality is, in a family business, well, what do they need? They need somebody to take it over. And a lot of times, not necessarily a family member is going to want to take it over. Well, if you've got that kind of a group underneath you there, and they're wanting and willing, and they've been training and they know how to do everything, well, they're the logical heirs to take over that business. And now you have an exit strategy, right? Because what's the most important thing of a business besides getting into the business is getting out of the business, right? And if you can't get out of the business, well, then it dies with you, and or whatever. And that's a shame. It's a loss, right? All
Yeah,
that work for what? I mean, go work for somebody then. In that case, I mean,
right.
and it's just not. It wouldn't be worth it. And so the idea, we have to find a way to bring that back, to bring back the honor of working in these smaller companies like that, because and you see it out there now, I guess, in the media. You see people, you know, it's more towards the bigger businesses, obviously, but it feels like all businesses get put under the umbrella of how maybe bigger corporations are treating their employees,
Yeah.
understanding that some of these smaller places, and there might be some small places out there, obviously, there's going to be everywhere, but that take advantage of their employees and that sort of thing. But for the ones that don't, I mean, there's not a big voice box out there for the ones that are taking care of their employees, right? And
I think, and it's hard to reconcile that, right? And I mean, the societal norm is the Instagram image of what's going great, and the reality, and I mean, say this from experience, being at the head of a multi-million-dollar business is incredibly lonely when you don't have the right people around you, and you're not able to bounce those ideas and share in the good times as well as the bad. And I think that the Friedman economics of the 80s around shareholder revenue being the most important thing, I think needs to be put to rest. And I think the model that you're sort of speaking to here around the ability to allow the people that create the business to flourish from their results and their efforts, I'm all for shareholder equity and making sure that there's a return on the investment. But at the same time, and in equal parts, the people that are on the floor every day need to have an equal compensation towards that end.
yep. I think some of
So,
that's coming back. Some of that's coming back now too.
okay.
And one of the biggest things that I saw in my banking time
Hmm.
was the removal of the base level and raw material manufacturing that we have here, especially in the United States, right? I mean, and it kind of ends and stops here, obviously. I mean, if it's not happening here, it's not going to happen anywhere else, because
Hmm.
there are other bigger players out there that are happy to take over,
Hmm.
that aren't to the better interest of everybody having something.
Hmm.
And so one of the biggest things that I saw was, like our smeltering plants and things like that had just been removed and taken away, aluminum, all these different things. Well, that impacts us here. I mean, if you're always renting, guess what? You're never owning. And so we
That's it.
have to own. And so I'm very grateful that potentially is going to be coming back. I think there's a lot of work to do there too, because there's always ways for international institutional money to make its way in and find its way. One of the biggest issues right now is private equity. And that, so
Hmm.
private equity right now is not regulated the same way as like stock market type stuff companies, right?
Hmm.
And so
Hmm.
what happens when you see all the money coming out of the stock market? Where's it going? It's going to private equity. And so
Hmm.
it's just a way for them to get out of being regulated that way now. And so what you're seeing now, we have some of our fruit, vegetable, fresh fruit type, companies that are out there. They're all getting bought up. And then when you look to see where it's getting bought up by, it's a nondescript private equity. And then when you go to look to see who actually really owns that nondescript private equity, you find out who's really out there and who's really buying it, and it's not to our benefit.
Hmm. What what are the corrective measures that you see? I mean, obviously not being in a position of legislative power, but what does that look like to you from a hypothetical position? What does that path
Um,
forward look like?
I mean, we have to kind of work within the confines, obviously, that we're in.
Hmm.
But it's trying to find a way to de-incentivize that as well. And I think that's what we're going through right now is a process of trying to de-incent that kind of activity and behavior. But it's the problem now, and this is where everything I was talking about the pendulum swings and going too far and that sort of thing. If you get too many people that are beholden or having to take benefit from one side, Well, they're not going to want to give that up, even if it's to the benefit of their next generation or their kids or whatever. They're like, it's like, but this is right now. It's like, I got to pay my mortgage now. I don't want to give this up now in the
Hmm.
benefit that my kids might get it later, right? You got to have
I
some trust.
mean, climate change, right? And what that looks like. We've got to pay for it today for it to be better for tomorrow. Whether you believe in it or not, there are changes that are happening
And
in our
it's a
environment.
global thing. And it's a
Right,
global thing too. This is the other part of it. Here, the other people out there aren't playing by the same rules. And
right,
so it's like you're all in the same pool and you're trying not to pee in the pool. But then the other guy at the other end there is throwing a party, and he's got 30 people over there, and they're just having a ball. And it's like
right.
you can be as good as you want to be, but if you don't find a way to help figure out how to incent them to play the same game, it's a very uphill battle with unfair hand, right? You're
Yeah,
playing against a dealer's hand.
yeah. So, I mean, particularly in your space, where you're beholden to farm production.
Sure.
I mean, climate change has to sort of play into that space. Farm ownership has to play into that space. The ability for the farm to produce its goods,
Mhm.
um, extract them from the land, and distribute them to your facilities for processing. What does all of that look like today versus 10 years ago versus 10 years from now?
So, I mean, in the past 10 years, it's actually been okay because of the ability to source from around the world, right? So that when you have an issue with strawberries in California, you can get them from Egypt, which a lot of people will do. And just an example, right? I mean, so
Yep.
that has been a benefit. Problem is that if you're doing that and all of a sudden production in California slows or has issues and then isn't coming back the same way, well, now you're beholden to whoever you're getting it from, right? And so that's again, we go
Right.
back to that manufacturing and home production kind of stuff there.
Hmm.
So that is an issue. And from our perspective too, it's like we've taken on for every four price increases we take on. I think I've passed along one for every four, roughly. Because we
Hmm.
get price increases. I try very, very hard not to pass those along as best I can. The other thing that I would say is for our industry, it's very difficult to pass along these increases. You believe it or not, I mean, you see increases at the grocery stores and things like that, but when you're talking to restaurants and on the wholesale side of things, right, hospitality, a slight increase here and there, and they're looking for somebody else as best they can. And
Yep.
so, one of the things that we've stuck with, no matter what, is quality.
Mhm.
And we're saying that I don't care if I'm going to lose. If I'm going to lose a customer here and there, I'm not changing up and reducing our quality in order to go after lower end type stuff. We're sticking with the
Mhm.
quality because that's what we started with. And
Mhm.
so my mindset and idea has always been is that people will always come back to the quality as well, right? And so, does it mean that you might be out once in a while? Potentially, yes. Fortunately we haven't been. But I said there's a recently, but hey, bottle caps being an
Mhm.
issue. I mean, it's just something that I wouldn't have thought of. But
Right.
yeah, so I mean, it really does stem. I mean, this is going to be this is a process coming in place right now, and it's going to take some time. And I hope that we get control back of our manufacturing and that sort of thing. Farming as well. We've got to find a way to save our farmers. Because I mean, it's like I said, we were just one of, I mean, how many thousands and tens of thousands of farming families are being put out every single year. I don't
Mhm.
see Farm Aid out there any longer doing those concerts and things like that.
Yeah.
There's not a lot of talk out there, and I think people look at farming and they see the equipment, they see the land, and they look at it and go, oh, well, those people are pretty well off,
Mhm.
and they don't realize it's borrowed money, and it's every year is a struggle, and one bad year for a crop, well, what are you going to do?
Yeah. And I mean, that's a whole nother conversation in and of
Sure.
itself, I suppose, is if you don't want to go external and you don't want to import your
Mhm.
foods and your goods, how do you subsidize and support your farmers so that they're able to make a wage that's worth it for them not to sell the farm and go into, some other industry. Eventually the costs go up because supply and demand, just that's the way that works, and then you're all of a sudden behooving to importing again because you can't afford domestic product. So I mean, that's a
You've got to cut out the middlemen in a lot of ways.
okay.
You've got to shrink that down the best you
Mhm,
can.
mhm,
The other thought that I had in my mind that I would love to see, and I know this is way off, but imagine if Amazon, or if the postal service operated like Amazon, to
mhm,
where everybody had access to logistics and distribution, and it was paid
mhm,
for versus being charged, just like the postal service. Imagine if the
mhm,
postal service allowed the farmer to get grain and everything else, to the barge, to the river, etc., cattle, whatever it might be, big or small. But if they had this solution, that's not outside the realm, you're like, no, that's crazy. It's not. They have. You understand how big that operation is, the billions
mhm,
and billions of dollars that it is. You could easily done that. And again, now you're talking about more of like a government, supported kind of a scenario there. But I would think that in terms of like logistics and being able to get something from place to place, that's kind of almost common good and service in a sense, that is very, very basic. That I think if we were able to figure that out, it's kind of like education. It's like everybody should be afforded education. It's like, well, if everybody could be afforded to where literally the person next door could put whatever their product they're making at home and put that into the market without being charged like twice the amount. Because you buy something from Amazon, I don't know if people realize this or not, there that buy stuff at home. You want to buy a bottle, right? That bottle
mhm,
may only cost you a few dollars to make, right?
mhm,
But you got to
mhm,
put that into Amazon or something like that and let it sell. You got to sell it for $15.
mhm.
And that's just to cover all the costs and expenses and then hope you don't have a whole bunch of returns or some other kind of big issue. You're not making a killing on that, right?
Yeah, yeah.
And so you've got to figure out how to be able to help get people's products into the market as well at lower cost. That's a big
Mhm,
part of the issue. Driving down energy expenses and all that is huge. I mean, that makes a
mhm,
big difference. But then again, it's also trying to figure out how to remove some of the middlemen that are in there or reduce their costs as well. That's all part
mhm.
of it.
And I mean, that's kind of why the government was responsible for mail to begin with, right? Is so that it didn't get manipulated and monopolized and managed in such a way. Um, so it's kind of interesting that we are where we are and sort of headed in the trajectory that we're headed in. Um, there's got to be a reset, right? And that pendulum has to come back to center and start swinging a little bit as opposed to the dramatic that we're seeing. So I mean, we sort of went off on a few different tangents here. This all started from my surprise of being introduced to UCG content around um, your suppliers, patrons participating in what you're creating and having their little piece and part. What does this evolve to? Where do you see this going for a beverage supplier to a sort of a low margin industry such as restaurants? How does that get monetized? Where does that future go?
So here's where I was going with this is what one of the bigger struggles that restaurants have is the ability to entertain, market, right, to their customers.
Mm-hmm.
And I also saw the opportunity with a company, if you're familiar with Muzak, that does the in-store music, right?
Yep. Mm-hmm.
And so it's hard just to play the inside radio station sometimes because people will
Yes.
get upset, right? And so sometimes you have to pick certain channels, or maybe you want to pick a certain mood or whatever, right?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And what I see is that there's nothing out there in the video space for that. And I understand Netflix is going to be coming up with their own here at some point soon, right? They're going to have the ability to create your own movie on Netflix. It'll be an AI generated type thing. You want to watch your own version of Marvel, Endgame or whatever, you can do that, right? You'll be able to watch your own version where whoever you pick as the character are going to be there instead, right? What I'm still not hearing though is people being able to literally create their own type of content and that sort of thing. Um, And so having that, where do I see this for the restaurants? I see it as a way for the restaurants to be able to participate and get free content filler that they're missing, and that they could put on a video screen. And all of a sudden now they're also marketing for their, $3 off next door for the guy's car wash, and he's going to
Right.
pay them to market it. Maybe
Right.
it's Tuesday and it's buy one get one wings, and they're going to market that on there as well.
Hmm.
We end up becoming the Tom and Jerry type content that goes in between all that. The benefit obviously is that I don't have to create all that content. Everybody else is creating it, and they're getting the opportunity to put their creations out there. Then you put a reward system on that, obviously, right? To where you reward people for doing that. You have a top list, you have a voting ability. Now all of a sudden you've got some potentially some really cool content coming out that it's hard to even envision that far out, right? I mean, you're really talking about, like I said, you're talking about the first part of it. It's like if you told me that Walt Disney, would have expected all of what has come from Boxcar Willie and
Right.
and Mickey Mouse, and then all of a sudden it's all this other stuff here. That's kind of where we're still at in some ways. It's like I've got a pretty good idea of where this can run to.
Mhm.
The other part of it is that it's got play from all these other characters, like you're talking about, in terms of the alcohol folks, the restaurants themselves, the machine folks, and it's simply because they don't have the ability to be able to do the same, but they see the benefit in it in terms of it being something widely accepted in the market, and in their industry specific, right? Where this goes from here, I mean, you already see it out there in some ways. I mean, there are other people trying to copy and do similar things at this point. We've been out for a while with this, even though we haven't pushed it all the way. But you're starting to see where people are trying to use characters and different things like that. And the reality is, it goes back to people don't always want to buy from you or I. They might want to buy from some nondescript character, right, that they might resonate with better. Um,
Mhm.
and then you're also capturing the nostalgia part, and then you're also capturing the youth of kids that are going to listen to a cartoon on a bottle or a box more than they're going to listen to mom and dad.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, I mean, I need some well parenting clippies, I don't know, Microsoft's favorite here's help along character, right?
That's funny.
So
Yes. Yep.
I mean, who knows? Interesting concept, and I'm really excited to sort of follow along with how that evolves and how that builds. Um, any if you were to describe yourself in 3 words, what would you use to sort of put that together?
3 words. Never give up. It's boy. I mean, and like I said too, the other thing is understanding that everybody has their own personal struggles, their own family struggles. To explain that, my wife, she's not working at this point now. I mean, she's been on a disability journey. I've got 2 kids that are in club travel volleyball, and so we travel. Like I just got back from St. Louis, and I'm gone for 4 or 5 days at a stretch in those cases. Right, I'm going to Salt
Right.
Lake City here soon again, and so being a cheerleader and all that for them, having all these other things going on, it's a lot. And so that
Hmm.
was the only other thing that I mentioned to other people out there is that, when you are seeing somebody's business of yours as well, right? It's everybody, we're all trying to do something.
Right.
And it's like, be kind, because I mean, the amount of time, effort, stress, everything else that they're putting out to put this out,
Hmm.
is in sometimes insurmountable in a lot of
Hmm.
times, right? And yes, I mean and boy, yeah, your perception on these type of things. Mine has always kind of been this way. I've seen it early on, but I mean I see it all the time where people's perceptions just are not in line, and they get older, right? Age creates that perspective.
Yes.
And as your age, you get more perspective. So having that perspective, I think, is one thing as well. But yeah, so never give up. You just never know where it's going to end or where it's going to lead. So.
I could see that. Do you? I don't know if you're a quote guy, but do you have a guiding quote that you use to sort of steer where you're going and how you're getting there, or that fires you up when you're down?
Yeah, I mean, I've probably got a couple. I mean, it's the whole thing of putting yourself in a position to succeed, right?
Hmm. Hmm.
Obviously, is one. The never give up, obviously, is another. Um,
Hmm.
yeah, I mean, it's those are probably I have probably a couple others that I just can't think off the top of my head there, but
Sure.
yeah.
Yeah. No, no sweat. So you'd mentioned that you sort of got into the juice space because it was all sugar and crap. And do you have a morning routine? Do you have a something that sort of fires you up, gets you started in the day? Is there meditation was a big thing 5 years ago. Today maybe it's cold plunging or getting out in the morning sun. What does that look like for you?
So yeah, lately, and this is more. It kind of goes in some spurts as well, right? Because especially if I get into a project that I'm heavy in
Sure.
or very involved,
Sure.
that goes from shower and caffeine, right? So
Yep.
shower, caffeine. I would say though that being able, I have been very big in trying to take care, doing fitness and that sort of thing, and that's been very big. So
Yes.
I'll be 49 here pretty soon, and I mean and I'm still able to go out and hit the volleyball court and play indoor and different things like that.
Yeah.
I know a lot of guys my age that's not on their schedule, and
Hmm.
so yeah, fitness, sauna, hit the sauna. That's a big
Nice.
one, right? 15,
Yeah.
20 minutes, 180 degrees plus. Cold,
Dry,
yeah.
not steam. Yep.
Cook
Okay.
yourself.
Yep. I like it.
So yeah, but that's I mean, and the other thing too, I would say here's one last thing that I would say that's really helped out too is
Mm.
um, kids. So
They keep you
holy
young,
cow,
eh?
and I mean young, but it's a different level of motivation, especially
Yes.
if they are motivated and active and doing something
Mhm.
that's unique or special or above average.
Mhm.
That I mean, talk about lighting a fire. I mean, it's like they're going to get up and go do a run or whatever, and you're going to sit and you know
Yep.
wait till they come back. I mean, it just creates a different level of being in the activity level. So I appreciate that. I enjoy it for sure.
Their ability to say, this is what I've done today. What have you done? Really hits different, right?
They're watching. I
They
mean,
are.
they are. I mean, and it's a whole different level of watching now too, because not only they get to see you there,
Mhm.
but especially for me too, like they get to see me on social media and different things like
Mhm.
that too. So they're watching me there too, and their friends are, And so, and I'll give you one more thing here too. One last thing that
Please.
this has changed how I have done certain things, a level of accountability.
Mhm.
Um, and it's doing kind of what we're doing here now, even too, just talking out certain things. When you talk about it, you bring it to life.
Yes.
And I don't know if people really, really appreciate and understand that. My kids
Mhm.
do now. I mean, they can see it happening,
Mhm.
from a hurricane symbol on a bottle, right? That looked like a whole, I mean, it looked like a circus mess to, what we got going now. But it's that whole I mean it's literally coming to life, and I've told
Mhm.
them already too. I was like, this is really weird for me because I'm working with these blunderbot characters that we have now, and I'm like, we're literally going to be talking to them as if they're their own real entity in person, whatever you want to call it, here at some point in time
Right.
soon. That's weird. It's like growing kids. It's like having 40,
Right.
50 kids on top of your actual kids.
Mhm.
So
Mhm. What what would be the one thing that you're most afraid of, and why? And you can be as vulnerable with that as you wish.
um I don't know about it's not afraid of necessarily.
Mhm.
I would be,
Mhm.
but I would be. I mean, I will say this: we have always said we've tried a lot of different things here too over these past decade plus, and
Mhm.
we have a running joke inside that it always comes back to Texas blends, and so it's been our lifeline, our life force, and all that. And it's been a huge family experience, obviously, because if you're running a business, the family's involved.
Mhm.
And that would be the biggest thing for me is the change there. As much as I could go do anything else, and I've had opportunities to go do a lot of different things,
Mhm.
it's the want to see this all the way through. And like I said, it's more because I know that there's a vision out there that hasn't been completely fulfilled yet.
Mhm.
And so that would be the biggest thing for me, or not being able to myself be able to see more of the vision, I guess. Even though
Mhm.
I have an idea of where it might head to. It's just like Walt Disney, right? Can you imagine if Walt Disney had gotten to see where everything is at now? I mean,
Yeah.
wow, the
Yeah.
satisfaction.
That's the the blessing and the curse of being a visionary, right? Is being able to just put it out there, but you need to be able to inspire those around you to sort of see it through, right?
Create something that is bigger than you and will last longer than you and takes more than you to build.
That's right. That's right. No, you'd sort of touched on the ability for Netflix to create a Marvel movie. Are you a superhero guy? Do you have a super favorite hero that or an individual that inspires you and that you model
Yeah, I
after?
mean, it's again, it's probably more of like the ADHD type of a thing in a sense, but it's you know, uh, the hero type thing like that. I mean, that's probably definitely a Superman, type.
Yeah,
I mean, it's
yeah.
um, and it's
Throwing on the cape, getting the power from the sun.
yeah. I mean, it just yeah, saving the day, right?
Yeah,
Coming in to
yeah.
save the day. Yeah, yeah.
I appreciate that deeply. Listen, Jim, thank you so much. I mean, there's so much on the table. You said it before we sort of hopped on. You're invited to have multi episodes, and I can definitely see why. There was so much that I didn't pull on and left out there to discuss. So I look forward to inviting you back and having
Appreciate
another
it.
conversation about where things are at and where things are going because I really appreciate your perspective and what you've got.
Appreciate it. I really appreciate it. And thanks for taking the time to visit as well and reaching out. So I really, really enjoyed the conversation. So great questions too.
Absolutely. Thank you so much. Absolutely my pleasure. Jim, again, thanks. We'll share how to get in touch with Texas Blends. Everything else will be in the show notes. So if you haven't learned about Texas Blends and their various characters, be sure to check it out after the show goes live. Thanks very much for joining us, and we'll see you next time.